Take a deep breath in, then slowly exhale all the stress out of your body. That calm you're feeling right now? That's what you get with HubSpot. Their all-on-one customer platform takes all the chaos of business and replaces it with one single powerful platform for all your teams. Generate better leads for marketing, close more deals for sales, and earn more 5-star reviews for service. So don't hold your breath. Visit HubSpot.com to learn more today.
There's a success factor for startups that we rarely talk about, and that is how the functional leader on your executive team that your company serves represents themselves, represents the new way of doing their function that your business is evangelizing. If your company builds engineering software, your head of engineering needs to symbolize for the function how you should work. If you're a fintech startup, your CFO needs to symbolize for the function how you should run a modern finance organization. And when you're a sales leader working for a sales tech company, you have to redefine and evangelize how sales leaders should act. Today, we have one of the best, my friend Ryan Longfield, the founding CRO of Gong, who's done so much as a company and as an individual for the practice of sales management. We're going to dive in to how he not only scaled the business to a $7 billion valuation, but how he thought about revolutionizing the way we thought how a CRO should work. I'm Mark Roberge, and this is the Science of Scaling. Has it been so fun hearing from the bleacher seats, your journey at Gong? I know you're off to new journeys today, but just wanted to kind of dive in with the audience today. And I have, and I'm sure you have too, talked to so many of our mentees that go off to be CRO, be sales leader, and they're sitting there after 6 months like, our product just isn't there. You know what I mean? Like I'm running the team, it's just not there.
Yes.
And it's so hard to do. It's like, hey, because you go and you talk to the founder, and the founder is a product person. I mean, how does this happen? And then they have a chief product officer. This is all like, you're telling them their baby's ugly. And you're like, dude, you just go sell. Like we just hired you to sell. So how did you get through all that noise? Because I'm sure there's a bunch of folks out there that are like, I just wish our product was better.
Yes, for sure. So I think the first thing is when you have an observation that is, you come into a company as a new CRO and you want to be able to establish your impact, and you want to be able to kind of put your fingerprints on a few things early to get some early wins, build some credibility, and then ideally go after one or two big things, right? So I figured out early on that this was not one of my quick wins. This was one of my big rocks that I was like, okay, this can be an anchor point for my success here. And so the first thing that I had to do was get clear on my early belief, right? You come up with a hypothesis, but that doesn't mean it's a good hypothesis. You got to go beat it up. And so you go into the organization and you find it. You ask the people that have been there client facing and they're building the product, like, hey, I'm seeing something. Is this crazy to you? Like, does this feel right to you? And let people beat it up with you and really come with a tone where you're looking for full feedback mode, like destroy it if it's wrong. And I think you get close to a breadth of deals yourself. So get really close to the market, and you go and you get tighter and tighter and tighter on this early belief that you have.
Boom. Quick wins versus big rocks. This hasn't come up. What is this? Is this like the 15th sales leader we've talked to? Maybe probably more. And it hasn't come up. And this is like so new leader one-on-one. Is like, you got to come in and you have your big list of all the things you want to do. And it's like a 3-year list. And you can pick maybe 2 to do this quarter. And you can't tackle the big ones right now. You need to find that quick one. You need to find that thing because everyone's watching you. The CEO, the founder, the board, your team underneath you. Is this the person that's going to move the needle? So you really have to think about your time and project selection very carefully. And Ryan did it beautifully. Of where do I have the most confidence that I can change the numbers for the better really quickly? And once I have that in place and I built that credibility, I can start knocking off my big rocks. Whether you're a new CEO, a new product leader, a new sales leader, a new market leader, it's great insight. Thanks, Ryan.
When I had my early kind of belief on this, it wasn't articulated in the way that it was at the end. It got tighter, and it some things added and some things fell off. So you go through a process where you don't just go blaze internally, and not get anyone's perspective.
Yeah, and at the time too, like you weren't the only player, and this happens a lot, especially like in sales tech. We've seen it between like SalesLoft and Outreach, and a whole bunch of folks who tried it. Like you guys were there, Chorus was there, Exec Vision was there. Looking back, why'd you all win? Yeah, I mean, Chorus ultimately got bought by Zoom. Like, and the game's not over, but like I would say, most people would say at this point, it looks like Gong really won. Why?
Yeah. That's it. That's a big question. But I will say that I think it almost entirely came down to execution. There was elements of like sales tactics that I could tell you about. Our marketing team was phenomenal. Still to this day, I get people coming up to me and being like, the content marketing that you all did in the early days was mind-blowing. And that was Udi and Chris Orlob building that out internally. That was a huge, huge force multiplier for us, our content marketing.
Pay close attention here. I don't know what to take away from it. I just know, factually speaking, roughly 50,000 startups have been created in sales and MarTech in the last 10 years. And who's really bubbled up to be a unicorn? Like we had the category with SalesLoft and Outreach, and there's probably hundreds that tried. We had this category we're talking about with Chorus and Gong. Again, hundreds tried. And it's like, why? I've asked them. I've asked every single one. The founders of Outreach, the founders of SalesLoft, the founders of Gong, the founders of Chorus, why? And the one thing they all say that's more than just execution, which is fine, right? But it's they created the category with the content. I don't know. I guess I sound like a HubSpot promoter here. And it's the same with Drift too, in their category. It's they leaned in, and it's just, I don't need this to become a content marketing commercial. That's not my intention. My intention is just that's just a really interesting pattern of those 5 unicorns. And they're all it's because we got way out and educated the industry on a new concept, how to codify SDRs, how to do great AI-driven sales coaching, and how to use chat to build more awareness and accelerate sales cycles. And so I don't know, what's your takeaway there? For me, as a founder or early sales leader, we need a sustainable moat strategy. We need a way to stand out. We need a way to close customers for a higher ACV than our ankle biter competitors. And we need a way to fend off the incumbents when they try to take our category. And for them, I think they define a category, and that was their moat. It's just something to think about. Let's get back to Ryan.
But there are little things in the sales process too. So it's all those little sales execution things that really amassed at the end of the day. And next thing you know, you have all the momentum. They have none of the momentum. And, when they're getting bought for $500 million, you're raising money for $7.25 billion. And that's actually where it ended up after 4 years.
Yeah. So, I'd be remiss if we didn't dive deeply into how you all used Gong. And I don't even know how to ask this question, because it's obvious, it's just one of those things. It's such a cool opportunity. You're the sales leader selling the tool that every sales leader tries to optimize around. So I don't know if I should ask it as how did you guys use it? I don't know if I should ask it as tell me about your most amazing customers and how they used it. Just whatever. Just talk to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Still to this day, I'm shocked at how many folks still use Gong just as here's a sales coaching tool, go use it, you and your reps. And the reps love it and the managers love it. And that's the end of it. Where it really gets interesting is how effectively are you managing your pipeline, your open pipeline today, because you have all this increased visibility. How good is your strategic decision-making, because you now have all this increased invisibility. How much better are you at change management across your organization, getting everybody on the same page, rowing in the same direction, and adopting new plays that are needed because your market changed or you have a new product launch or whatever it is that happens all the time. And, those other elements are the ones that people dramatically underweight in terms of Gong's effectiveness. And so we leaned into those huge, as you can imagine, because it's our solution. Almost everybody runs a one-on-one with a manager and a rep in a similar fashion, especially when you're doing pipeline review. You go in and you ask a litany of questions where it's like a mini interrogation, and the manager's sitting there waiting to see in key areas if those things are buttoned up or not, right? It's like age old. What if you could go into that one-on-one and you already had the answer to all of those questions? It would change the entire dynamic, right? So you're going and you're like, okay, are you at power? That's in Gong. Don't need to ask that question. Have you talked about price? That's in Gong. You don't need to ask that question. You know, like, what are the objections you got on the last call? When's the next meeting set up? Every single one of these is in Gong. So if you spend 10 minutes as a manager before looking through it, looking at all the red flags and signals that are in there to say you're not at power, you're not multi-threaded, the person's not responding to your emails or in-mails or whatever it is. All these things are in Gong. You come in, you go, hey, we're going to talk about these 5 deals today. We're going to go deep in these areas. Or, hey, I saw a theme across the entirety of your pipeline that you don't multi-thread very well. And I think, you know, we know from Gong that affects win rates by 23%. So we're going to spend some time there today. Completely changes the way that you execute against open pipeline and make your people more successful. So that's one example in the area of pipeline where it's not like skills development coaching like most people use Gong for. It's interrogating your pipeline.
Oh, that's so cool. And I don't know if this checks out for you, but when, you know, obviously we did very data-driven skill assessments and pipeline reviews with our sales reps at HubSpot. And I tried to coach my managers to not come in and say, I looked at your data and here's what's broken with you and here's how I'm going to coach you. I just found it, and I don't know if this was just in my head and I was overly empathetic, but I found it to be more effective to say, like, hey, here's the data. What did you see? And now that we've looked at like 15 different charts, like, what do you want to work on this month? And how can I help you?
Yeah.
And I don't know if that, like, is that now compromise, or do you find that to be a good, like, did you do that? Like, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that.
I think it's stylistic, and I also think it depends on the person on the other end of the table. I personally am always the one where I'm like, hey, don't do the thing where you like ask me a whole bunch of questions.
Get to the chase.
Like, dude, just tell me what you think, right? Like, I'm an adult. I'll tell you if I agree, and I'll tell you if I disagree. And so, you know, for right or for wrong, I've always tried to do that with my folks, is like, you know, in a performance review. Do you start it off with like, hey, how do you feel like things went in the quarter, right? It's like, maybe you do, but like, I don't want them hanging out there very longly of like, I want to put the burden on me. I did the homework. I'm coming in with a perspective. I agree that I'll hold this lightly until we talk about it, because I'm not going to come with an indictment. But it's kind of like the same thing I did when I came in early at Gong, right? I'm not going to like hide my perspective and just like ask a bunch of questions I'll just come out and state it. Like, hey, I saw this in the data. Here's what I think is going on. What do you think is going on? You know, so it's probably more similar to what you're saying than not. But yeah, I'll usually come out and just say it.
And can we like hone in that same question about the best practices of Gong utilization in a startup sales environment? Now, like, because some of the things you rattled off were like, how is the pipeline, change management? Like, certainly change management is going to be a little bit of a bigger company. Pipeline will be relevant to startup, but like, I'm thinking selfishly from stage 2, and I'm also thinking about our audience as well. We're picturing like 1 or 2 reps. You know what I mean? Like, maybe we have like 15 good opportunities. Like, it's not hard to like quickly diagnose the entire thing. Like, and I don't even know if like, you know, should we be using Gong data at the board level? Like, as we're like looking at these company performances every quarter or every other month, are there any unique like recommendations you have there?
So on the startup versus enterprise relevant features and functionality, I would say I think that most oftentimes smaller companies give too much credence into, hey, we're not there yet type of statements. So I'll give you an example. So when we did a lot of our change management, or when we did big change, say we deployed a new product, or we In this case, we changed our value proposition. Like as an early company, you should be changing your value proposition probably decently often until you feel like you've really nailed it. And so when you're in discovery phase, like, you could be changing it every couple of months, maybe not holistically, but tweaking it around. And so let's say Gong, we've got 5 or 6 sellers, and we're trying to go from this very narrow coaching thing to the 3 pillars. Well, I'm on the floor. I'm with them. They're all around me. I can hear what they're doing every day. But do I know who the people are that are utilizing this thing in its entirety every day? Like probably not. Probably only a couple hours of the day I'm actually on the floor. I'm usually actually in a conference room. And so to be able to go in there at the end of the day and say, okay, of my 5 sellers, this person had it come up in 85% of their calls. This one's 43%. That one's 64%. Then I can spin around my chair and say, hey, Jane, I see that, you're smashing it with this value proposition. Nice job. And then I can turn around my chair the other direction and say, hey, Jimmy, like why only 41%? It doesn't seem like you're really leaning into this. And that's powerful. I mean, it's only one person of 5, but it's also 20% of my force. Mm-hmm. Right. So I think it's like, I still need that insight. And then to your point about the board, once we made this a company initiative, the board was then asking, hey, how are things going with this big initiative? Again, whether it's a product launch or a messaging change or a pricing change, whatever it is, to be able to go in and say, hey, it changed our win rates by X. And, when it's mentioned, it changes our win rates by Y. Or we have 50% capture on this new product that we're trying to sell, cross-sell. And so we've got 50% capture. When we diagnose why we didn't get the other 50%, we actually see that in the other 50%, we're not even bringing it up.
Yeah, I need to push harder on this in our portfolio and the ecosystem. I don't understand why I've never seen a single Gone report in a board deck. That's perplexing. They've produced reams of data and research that shows, for example, that the salespeople that speak less on the first call end up being your top performers. And that's just like statistically representing stuff that's been talked about for over 100 years of research and books on sales. So when we're in a board meeting with a company that has 20 salespeople, why don't they show us that data? Why don't they just show us like what percent of the time are our reps speaking more than the customer on the first call and which reps? Just as a indication of how effective we're being. Because a lot of times we're sitting there like, we missed the number. Why? The marketing team think the salespeople aren't good. The sales team thinks the product's not good. The product teams think the demand gen's not good. We need to comb through the data to diagnose exactly what's going on. And just Gone has opened up a whole new frontier for us to do that. And hopefully this dialogue with Ryan has opened up some ideas, and maybe you can try it yourself. Let's get back to him.
When you're diagnosing the why, especially for big board stuff, like the more granular you can get with what's really going on, man, you just look like a hero to have that level of insight into your business. The best way to use the Gong data from my perspective is you come up with a hypothesis about what's going on, and then you just easily go vet it, whether it's true or not, right? So an example of a customer success piece, which is like my hypothesis on why accounts are churning is because pre-sales, we don't do a great job of truly capturing the breadth of their technical landscape. And then it comes and bites us in the back, but once we deploy, something like that. Whatever your hypothesis is, well, then you can go and you can say, what percentage of time at this sales stage was spent doing tech eval? And does it correlate to churn? Well, then you just really quickly and easily either knock down your hypothesis or supported it.
The Sales Evangelist, hosted by Donald Kelly, is brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. Each week, Donald interviews the world's best sales experts, successful sellers, sales leaders, and entrepreneurs who share their strategies to succeed in sales right now. Folks like Jeffrey Gitomer, Jill Conrath, Bob Berg, and Guy Kawasaki, to name a few. They share actionable insights and stories that will encourage, challenge and motivate you to hustle your way to the top income status. If you're someone looking to take off in your sales career and earn the income you deserve, this is the podcast for you. Listen to Sales Evangelist wherever you get your podcasts.
A lot of the folks that listen to the show, and you know too, like your peers and the folks we mentor, one of the biggest questions they have for us is like, I'm looking for a new gig. Like, how do I diligence it?
Yeah. There's a list of things that you need to get really clear on, from most important to least important. And I think actually most people don't do the light lift, I'd say. It doesn't take that much thoughtfulness to say what's most important to me at this time. And it changes. So mine at that time is different than my time than what I do today. And so it's not just like lift and shift from one to the other. You have to stop and really think about in life, like, what am I optimizing for? And in my career, what am I optimizing for at this moment? Make your list. So, there's some things that never change for me. And like at the top of the list for me, at the time and still now, the thing that I do to find an exceptional company that I think is going to do really well. Like I want to find the company that is doing well today, but is going to do much better in the future. And so I'm not going in to like be the superhero and turn the thing around. I'm going in because there's some momentum here and I can add to the momentum and I can lean into it and I can leverage it.
Hey folks, just Mark here. Yeah, I'll kind of build on Ryan's great point here around being thoughtful around where you want to go in your career. And he's talking like even broader than just like the work stuff. He's looking at this holistically, which I think is great. And obviously there's so many books about that and how you define success, et cetera. But I do think, let's go right back to the career of sales. Like you should start to form a hypothesis on who you want to be. Like, do you want to be the CRO of a huge public company or CEO? Do you want to be on the entrepreneur side for your entire career? And if so, do you want to be more like the founder? Or do you want to be like the CRO that comes in 2 years before the IPO? Or do you just want to stay in sales? Right? So like, there's no bad answers here. I can list off a ton of people in all those categories that are so happy with their career. They make a lot of money. They do what they do well. They find soul food in what they do. And oftentimes when I meet with someone and they're like, I just need some career advice, they haven't gone through that cycle. They haven't thought about like that 5 or 10 year end game. It doesn't have to be like, I know for sure. It's just like, do you have a sense? Are you a big company or small company person? Are you a career sales leader? Do you want to be a career salesperson? Do you want to eventually get into the founder or the CEO route? That has a pretty significant implication on the right next gig. And I think Ryan's been thoughtful about that. Let's hear more about it.
When I was looking at LinkedIn, the way I thought about that one is I was like, okay, there's this thing going on in the world that has never been there before. It's called a professional network. The way that people look for jobs at the time anyway with job boards. And I was like, but that's stupid because the best people at any time usually aren't looking. It's 80% of the labor market. And only headhunters really do the passive candidate recruiting thing. I was like, that's not going to exist. That's not going to be the same in the future. The passive candidate recruiting thing is going to go way down the stack. Who's going to win that? I think LinkedIn's going to win that. I think this professional network thing is going to go somewhere. So like, I'll lean into that, right? And LinkedIn was only 300 employees when I joined it. So it was non-obvious at the time. And Gong felt very similar in that. It was like, what's the big trend that Gong is leaning into? Well, there's this data set that exists in every organization that is completely untapped into, but it's probably the most valuable data you could possibly have, which is the conversations that your client-facing people are having with the market. Like that is endlessly fascinating. Every big strategic question that I'm asking right now as a business leader could be very well informed in terms of what actually is going on in the conversation. But it's completely unharvested because technology hasn't allowed us to do that in the past. This is going to be huge. So there's like a big trend that I was seeing in the world, or the substantial change that would come from this technology that would unlock, and a trend that was leaning in that direction. And I wanted to lean into that. And I felt the same way about Shopify. So unless I have that, it's pretty binary for me. Unless I have that moment where it makes sense at the highest level, I will not pursue that opportunity. And it's filtered out more opportunities for me than not, for sure.
Was that just intuition on your part, just kind of like reflecting, thinking, or did you diligence it with other folks too? Like if we stay with Gone as an example.
I wanted to work for somebody at the time who was an established executive who had been a CEO before that I could learn from, and that I valued the way they thought about business. And it was just one question after another. It was like the small things too. At one point he told me this story about buying headphones for the people on the floor. And he's like, yeah, the finance team wanted me to get these cheap headphones, but no, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to go all the way. And so I bought them like, $350 headphones, and, they're wearing them every day. Shouldn't we get them the best? And I was like, yes, like this is,
Nice.
I love this type. So it's the small things and the big things. But yeah, we hit it off. That's the starting place of the journey. Like I won't even entertain a company if I can't get there after the first conversation with somebody senior at the organization. So if I'm not there and I'm not like, okay, I get it and I'm in, then nothing else happens. But yeah, that's not full due diligence. Then it starts all of the most important questions, right? Who are you backed by? How well financed are you? What are your growth ambitions? Do I think those are realistic or not? Do I love the executive team? Like really love the executive team and feel like these are the people that I want to go to war with and build with over time. Some of the other elements to kind of vet out what a great company is and if they're set up for success. The competitive landscape. Do I think that this company has the technology and the people to win in this space versus others? Because it doesn't happen in a vacuum.
And talk more about Amit, because I think a lot of folks put a lot of emphasis on their boss, their CEO, the founder.
The first thing to me is a level of humility. And the younger and the less experienced the CEO, the more humility that I want to hear from that person. And so I'm actually fine working for a younger and less experienced CEO. I mean, how many stories are there where that goes exceedingly well? So it does go well. But if there's no humility and there's not somebody knowing that they need to hire in expertise around them and that that's really valuable to them and that they don't know everything, then I'm running out the door at that point. So humility is really, really high on my list when I'm talking to a CEO, whether they're experienced or not, but especially when they're younger in their work experience.
I like really connect with you on that. I think we talk deeply about ego and definition of ego well beyond just like being cocky or something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
But when you're looking at your venture into Shopify, like how do you measure success?
Yeah, I think again, it changes at different periods of life. And that's why the criteria that you go and do diligence against as to like what the best opportunity changes is because the definition of success at any particular time probably changes too. So, for example, before I was married and before I had kids, I could give myself to my work in a way that I just don't, like I'm just not going to do that when I have 2 kids at home and a wife that I'm looking to invest in and they're more important than my work. So I think it's like, I do think those definitions of success change over time. And I think they change as you mature. When I was a younger professional, I feel like my definition of success was all about me. And I think that like the best leaders that I know and the best, people that I know and want to emulate, they're every year that they do this, their definition of success gets less and less focused on themselves and self-actualization. Like I was very driven by self-actualization earlier in my career. And just like, what's the biggest possible job that I could ever choose that somebody would give me, that somebody would trust me with, that I could work my butt off and show the world that I can do this thing.
That's great. Interestingly, you said how you have to be very clear and reflective around your goals and what you're trying to achieve. Yeah. So given that we're honing in on Gong, can you talk about what that was? I know it was probably different when you came to LinkedIn. It's probably a lot different when you came to Shopify. When you came to Gong, how did you define your, like, let's call it your first principles or whatever you were trying to achieve?
Yeah. So I don't remember the exact order, but I'll rattle off as I remember them. Very close to the top of the list was optimizing for growth in my professional skill set. I think that oftentimes people optimize for money right away, But I've always thought that if I become the most valuable professional I could possibly be, then the money will just come along with it. I think it's a byproduct, not a focus. And so when I was picking this job, I was like, okay, does this feel like I'm going to learn something that I need to know and that will be a crash course for me? And is it optimizing around my growth? And I think that led me to the job itself, which was first time CRO. I'd never done this before. It was earlier stage than I had ever been before. The company was only 70 employees. We had like 5 million in ARR. I mean, it was very, very early. And then who I was working for, like all of those are really for me about growth at the time. Growth was the point that was kind of paramount.
Yeah, that's not uncommon that I want to solve for my growth. At the time where Ryan was in his life, in his career, coming out of LinkedIn, great run, and just like a lot of like unknown ahead. And I think kudos, picked Gong, grew a lot, but let's appreciate the correlation between your personal growth and the growth of the company. When you go pick a heavy grower, you're going to kind of be forced to grow. And if you're at a company that's relatively flat, even if you're ready to grow, you're not. And so I think that's really what Ryan saw. It came true. And sure did he seize that moment. Let's get back to him.
I think the other one was I wanted to pick a winner. So that was certainly like, what company and do I believe this thing can be utterly successful? To me, that's the thing that like, if you get that right, a lot of other stuff falls into place. As the company starts being successful, you hire really good talent, and then all of a sudden you're surrounded by A players, and and you learn a ton from that. The money comes along with it, obviously. The career or the resume strength comes along with it. So picking the right company, like I wanted to pick an A player in terms of the company. So growth number 1, A player company number 2. And then I wanted to, this is always true for me, but I want to do it with people that I really, really enjoy. And so I think that was probably on there, somewhere around number 3 or 4, which was like, do I just really enjoy these people? Do I want to problem solve with them? Like my favorite thing about work is getting in front of a whiteboard with a nasty, complex, hairy problem and getting a whole bunch of smart people to attack it, right? Like I think that's why a lot of us love this stuff. Are these the people that will do that with me and that I can do that with?
That's great. Let's talk about the first 6 months. You must have walked in with a handful of really fun opportunities that you saw and perhaps even challenges that you were excited to take on. Let's unpack those.
So I came into a team that were, I think, 5 salespeople, a really strong previous sales leader, and about 5 or so SDRs. There was no sales operations. There was a revenue operations person that managed the CRM. That was it. There was no enablement. There was no other real kind of cross-functional support. Like product marketing was actually doing content marketing at the time, not really product marketing, et cetera. So I came in, observed that there was some really strong talent in place. I felt like kind of check number 1 was, how's my team? Do I feel like the good talent's in place? And I was like, okay, good. I then came in and kind of looked at the way that we sold. And I was like, oh, actually, these folks they've been trained well. They have really good selling chops. But my biggest observation immediately was the value proposition is way too narrow. And that this very narrow value proposition was not going to translate well up market, which was one of the main reasons why I was hired into the company. And so it was a big observation, and I saw it as the heavy lift that it ended up being.
Well, this has been amazing, Ryan. I can't wait to have you back in 2 years now that you've started the next journey at another amazing company, Shopify, with a totally different stage. But looking back and it's been so fun to unpack the Gong story. And I just want to point, I think you're underestimating your impact, because as you look at any great software company, especially at the application layer, the functional leader that's aligned with the CVP is so critical as a symbol for the company. If you're at GitHub, the head of engineering is critical. If you're at HubSpot, the CMO is critical. If you're at NetSuite, the CFO is, you're more than just the CFO. You really are a symbol of what you're trying to evangelize. And I don't think Gong could have picked a better CRO to be the symbol around the movement that they have done. So congratulations. Thanks for being on the show, Ryan.
Means a lot, man. I appreciate it.
All right, that does it for me, folks. I'd like to thank our showrunner, Matthew Brown. Editing support comes from Pizza Shark Productions. Of course, I want to thank HubSpot for Startups and the HubSpot Podcast Network for keeping the audio on. And by the way, if I'm a huge fan of feedback. And so get this, if you're listening on Spotify right now, check your phone, see that Q&A field? That's a direct line to me and our show. So let us know what you think. All right, I'll see you next week.